This show is sponsored by PowerfulWomenUSA.com, a place to be inspired by successful women. Hey everybody, I'm Jill Conway, and this is Secrets of Powerful Women, a show dedicated to celebrating and supporting strong and successful women and sharing their stories. I'm hoping that you will be inspired to pursue your dreams, feel empowered, reclaim your voice, and discover your strengths. My guest today is Lisa Powers. Lisa is the founder of Powers Divorce Coaching in New Jersey. She is a certified divorce coach, a divorce transition and recovery coach, and a licensed social worker and paralegal. Lisa, are you there? Thank you for joining us.
I'm here. Jill, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast today.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. All right. So let's begin. You have a very unique business. So you are a divorce coach and you are so much more. So tell listeners exactly what you do. It's hard. I know.
I know. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. Because a divorce coach is like having your own personal guide to help you navigate the divorce process. So I'm not an attorney and I'm not your therapist, but I bridge the gap between the two professions. So I help support you emotionally and practically. And I help you stay grounded. I'm the person in your corner who's your advocate, help you make clear decisions and focus on what's most important for you and to think future focused.
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of a divorce coach before. How did this come about? How did it all start for you?
Thank you for that question, because it's really one that's very meaningful to me through my own personal journey. I actually discovered divorce coaching through my own, it was very lengthy and contentious divorce. I was doing research online, like most people do when they're overwhelmed and they're looking for answers. And I stumbled across the concept of divorce coaching, and it immediately caught my attention because it was exactly the kind of support that I wished I had when I started my divorce process. And consequently, friends, acquaintances, friends of friends began reaching out to me during my process, and they were asking me advice, what I've gone through. They just wanted to talk about their process. And I was really, really drawn to this, and I realized that I was actually doing it before I got certified. I just didn't have a name for it. So,
there's I know so many women who have gotten a divorce, and so many have struggled because, it's obviously very difficult. You're ending a relationship. So there's a period of grieving, even if it wasn't a happy relationship, I think. But it's also, and I want you to speak to that. I mean, it's getting through it is one thing. And then I love that, and I want to talk about this part later, but you're also the transition and recovery coach, which is something that is so needed because people stay in that dark place for a long time.
They do. And, when people think about divorce, nobody's ever on the same path in a relationship. One person typically starts thinking about divorce about 2 years before they actually say they want one. So by the time somebody asks for a divorce, one person is emotionally way ahead of the other one. And the other spouse that may feel blindsided has to catch up. So one spouse has already started that grieving process before the other one has, which plays a big part in how the divorce process unfolds.
Wow, right. Like you said, because it's probably a shock to the other person. So you're coaching.
Yes.
What are the stages of the part? Like, who is this coaching for? Like you said, so it can begin early. It can begin very early for someone, right?
Yes. I have clients that come to me. They're still married. They haven't decided if they want a divorce. They want to explore what divorce might look like. They don't understand the process. They don't understand what would life look like afterwards for them. So it's not, it's obviously not marriage counseling because I'm doing it with just one of the couple. But we do explore, is the marriage salvageable? What are the issues that are going on? What's the reasons that they're thinking about divorce? Is there anything that we can shift in their thinking? Can we go from being like a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? So I'm not an advocate of divorce, but I am there to help somebody navigate the process once they decide that's the right decision for them. So somebody could come to me at those early stages, or they could come before they get an attorney. They've already made the decision that they would like to move forward in the divorce, and I can help them build their team. Or they may come to me while they're in the divorce process because they're really struggling with the emotional component. They may have triggers that are getting in the way, obstacles that they have to overcome, or they may need to figure out how to work more effectively with their attorney, with their spouse, communication skills, setting boundaries. And a lot of times people come to me after divorce to figure out what is my next step? What does my next chapter look like? And that's a big one. Who am I and how do I redefine myself? Because when you're after divorce, there's a loss. There's the question of who am I now? I'm no longer a wife. Am I, do I have small children? Am I, mothering like I did in the past? Is it empty nest? A lot of people that come to me are in a gray divorce where they're over 50.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I feel like a lot of my friends, right, in that late 40s to 50s age group, that's when I think that's when a lot of people start reevaluating their life, right? And it's like, is this what I want moving forward? Is that true?
It's very true. I mean, the kids graduate from high school, they're off to college, and now you're dealing with the empty nest syndrome. And if you're getting a divorce, then you're dealing with that grief of my children aren't around, my whole family unit looks different, and there's a sense of loneliness. That's a big component, and that alone keeps people in divorce. I don't want to be alone. I'm afraid to move forward. Fear is a huge factor.
So what do you mean? They stay in a marriage, on a happy marriage because of that?
People do. They're afraid of moving forward. I've been with my spouse for 20, 30 years, and I don't know how to navigate on my own. I've been a couple. And so it creates a lot of fear. Will I be able to financially support myself? Will I ever get into another relationship? What is this going to do to the family unit? How are my kids going to feel about me? What about my friends? What about my family, the extended family, the town I live in? How am I going to be perceived? Like, all of that actually shapes people's decisions.
Wow. I mean, when you say all of that, it's so overwhelming, I would think, for most people, right? Because it's in reality, it's not just an end of a relationship. It's an end of who you were.
That's exactly right. You have to redefine your relationship with yourself.
I think that's probably the hardest part of it all. Right. I mean, as you said, you have to, and I think there's multiple, I'm going to be 53, and I think there's multiple stages in your life where it's okay to be like, who am I and who do I want to be moving forward? And whatever that looks like, I'm married for a long time, but I think in all ways, in your career, in your relationships, your friendships, it's like, am I the person I want to be, right? And it's such a, when I first met you, when I talked to you, I stumbled upon you really, and who you were and what you were doing. And I was like, wow, this is so important, because I feel like so many women and so many men go through this. It's not so uncommon, divorce, obviously, and they struggle with so many different aspects. And there's men too. They don't have anyone to talk to about it, the emotional component of it, right?
It's true. And I always say there's two parts to a divorce. There's the business component and there is the emotional component. And when you go through divorce, your attorneys get you through the business of divorce. They're not mental health professionals, even though some of them are absolutely wonderful to talk to, but they don't have the mental health background. So how do you go through your divorce, I'm going to say, as smoothly as possible, as effectively as possible, without letting the emotions get in the way of making your decisions, because that's a huge piece of it. Some of us are angry when we go through divorce. Sure. There could be infidelity, financial infidelity, and they're angry, and they base their decisions based on emotional justice.
Sure. So how do you remove that factor from it? How do you get them through that? Because I would think that's, how many percentage? I mean, 85% of a divorce is the emotional element.
So you really have to start getting them to think about divorce as a business transaction. Mm-hmm. You have to get them to think about what are the goals and what are the objectives, and squeeze out what do we take to the attorney and what do we deal with, on our own or with a divorce coach, so that we can make really, really smart and, effective decisions for ourselves that are going to be future focused. So if there's anger and let's say there's infidelity, a lot of people think that that's going to get them more in their settlement.
Or the emotion of the anger.
Yeah, like you cheated on me, so therefore I'm entitled to more, and they don't let go of that.
Right.
Or, there was domestic violence and you were horrible to me, so because you were so terrible, I'm going to get maybe more money from you, or,
I'm going to get back at you. And that way, yeah. Right. And by that way, I'm going to pursue everything you have, right? Right.
Right. And it can take people down a very lengthy and expensive divorce. So I try to help tweeze out those emotions so that we deal with them and we don't let them, rule the divorce process.
Wow. What's, in your experience, you've been doing it for quite a while now, what is the most common reason for a divorce within your clients? I mean,
it depends on the age group. A lot of it, people just, grew apart. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's infidelity, financial infidelity. Those three things, I think, would probably be the top reasons that I hear.
Right. Which is hard to get over. It is hard to get over, I think, for most people to get past the betrayal of it.
It's very, very difficult.
You talk about financial infidelity. What is that exactly?
So a lot of people in their marriages, one person's in charge of the finances, and it could be where I'm just using this as an example because it's not always the woman doesn't know and the man's controlling the finances, but the person who isn't involved in the finances might not know what's going on, and there could be filtering of money, there could be if somebody is having an affair, then there's dissipation of marital funds, and they have no idea that this is happening. People have addiction problems, gambling problems, money's being, used for things that one of the spouses, they're not aware of.
Wow.
And then they, once they get divorced, the purpose is like having full disclosure of the finances, and either somebody doesn't want to give that information, or they come to find out that this is what has happened, or they find out beforehand, and that's the reason for the divorce. Right.
So, I love that you focus your whole business on the whole person. I think you've said,
yes,
which is a very rare thing, because again, of the women I know who have gone through a divorce, we forget about those elements. We forget about those women and men who are broken, right? So where do you sit in the first meeting with someone? Where do you go? Like you talk about what exactly has happened, and what's your first step through their process?
So, I typically start with having a discovery call. I do a complimentary 30-minute discovery call because I want to understand, where the client is at, what's going on in their life, where are they in the process right now. Let's see if we're a good fit to work together. And I want to be able to explain what I can do to help them, to advocate for them, to empower them and move them through the process.
Right. So
that's really where I start.
Right. Well, you were telling me you were a paralegal, you're a social worker. Where did you grow up wanting to be in this space, or what did you want to do when you were younger?
Oh, that's a good question.
Everyone has a very different than where they end up, but that's why I ask.
You know what? This is I did not think that I was going to be a divorce coach growing up, because I didn't even know that there was such a thing.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I was very, very interested in nutrition and medicine So in my head, I guess I thought I was going to, become a doctor. I ended up getting a degree in nutrition and then a master's degree in exercise physiology. So I kind of got my, the body component of what I was passionate about.
Right.
And then it just morphed into learning about how do people think, what obstacles get in their way. And that's what led me to get my social work degree. So it was an evolution. It really wasn't something that I set out saying, this is what I'm going to do.
Well, you must obviously those tools, and I forever feel like the process we've gone through throughout our life, has helped us get to the position we are in now. So I think all of those things probably help you in your job now, right? Because there is that mind-body connection in everything we do.
It is. And, especially when you're going through a divorce, you're so overwhelmed. So one of my roles as a divorce coach is how do I de-escalate your emotions so that you can think clearer? How do we incorporate self-care into your divorce process? How do I keep you on more, stable footing so that you can make really smart decisions for yourself?
What are some tips for self-care? Because I think that's so important for everybody. What would you suggest to someone?
So I like to create emotional toolboxes. And that might sound like a silly term, but I think that different times, different tools work for us. So if you have a lot of resources to pull from when you're feeling overwhelmed, you can go into this imaginary toolbox and say, okay, I'm going to try this one on right now. Let's see if this one works for me. Okay, that one didn't work, so I'm going to try this. So we do visualization, breathing exercises, journaling, exercise, sleep habits, talking about situations, exploring different options. So I really do use a whole host of different techniques. We talk about ways to de-escalate when you're in mediation, when you're going to court, tapping exercises, anything that's going to keep you grounded. It could be splashing water on your face. It could be, tapping your thighs under the table when you're sitting across from your ex, things that are going to help you get back to centered.
So many people and so many women, that I talk about, they don't even see or they can't even visualize what their future looks like post-divorce, I think, or post any traumatic event, because it is a traumatic event. And so, what do you say to someone who comes to you and says, my life's over, I have nothing left. I'm a failure. I've heard that too. When people think they're a failure because a relationship is gone.
So that's part of shifting their mindset because that's a very, very fixed mindset. So I like to create more flexible thinking, and I try to empower people to believe that they can create a better future for themselves. But to do that, we start when we're in the process of what are our goals? What do we need? What do we envision our future looking like? What are the things that we're trying to go after? How do we create financial freedom? And so I do that during the whole process, not at the end. So by the time that they're at the end of their divorce, they feel like they have some direction. They have a voice again. Sometimes we have to go back and figure out when was there a time in their life that they felt good about themselves. And we start to explore that feeling on a cellular level. We do body scanning. What is this emotion? Where do I feel it in my body? What is it bringing up for me? What are the triggers that are happening? And even though I'm not really doing, therapy with them, I do use a lot of my social work techniques, and we can address the triggers and the obstacles and family of origin stuff, even though that's really not so much of what I focus on. A lot of the people that come to me are in therapy, so I'm not replacing therapy. And I use this example. If you bring a suitcase to your therapist is going to be like, oh, this is great. You brought your suitcase. Let's unpack that. Let's see, what your past looked like, your family of origin, stuff. Let's go back and revisit, your child within. But when you bring your suitcase to me, I'll say, oh, that's great. You brought your suitcase. Where do you want to go? Because my job is helping you get there.
Oh, excellent. What a perfect way to go to commercial break. We'll be back with Lisa Powers, a divorce coach. That's coming up. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. If you love what you're listening to, head to powerfulwomenusa.com for previous shows. And you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, and YouTube. We'll be back. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. Lisa Powers is here. She is the founder of Powers Divorce Coaching, a certified divorce coach and divorce transition and recovery coach, which I think is very important. So we left off at the break saying about the suitcase, and you have to start, you take it from the angle of where are you going? What does your future look like, Lisa?
Yeah.
Right? So talk about that.
So that's actually the most important piece to this is what are your goals and what are your objectives? What are we trying to accomplish? Because the divorce process is, it's unfamiliar. It's like a foreign language. If you've never been divorced before, you don't know how the court system works. You might not know the legal jargon. You might not know what to ask your attorney. And, I've heard people say they feel like they're, being herded. They're like sheep, whatever, the attorney's not going to spend a ton of time with you, laying out the entire divorce process. It's kind of like what comes up. As a need-to-know basis, here's what we're dealing with now. But it's important to define what your goals and your objectives are because you'll save money and you won't waste time in negotiating about things that aren't really important, that aren't going to make a difference in your divorce, which gets us back to that emotional piece, that emotional justice piece. Right. So I help people really clarify what their goals are. I do a lot of educating about the legal process. Now, not giving legal advice, but about the legal process. So somebody understands, what happens? What am I looking for? Am I looking for alimony? Am I looking for child support? How do I define my assets and the debts, and how does that play into the big picture? And if you don't mind, can I tell you a story about a person that I worked with after that process who was arguing and spent $10,000 in her mediation because she didn't want her husband, soon to be ex-husband, to be chewing tobacco in front of her children. So instead of negotiating the things that really matter, which would have been a goal and objective to her divorce, she would not let the process continue until he agreed that he wouldn't chew tobacco. And he was like, okay, I'm done. I'm walking away from the negotiating table. And then she finally had to, say, okay, I guess I need to let that one go. But it was $10,000 later on something that was not even enforceable.
Well, would you say at that point, it's almost like a power, they're trying to, you're trying to get control at that point, right? It's a power struggle.
It is a power struggle. And I think when you're in the divorce process, we feel very out of control.
Yes.
And when we have to allow, other people to make decisions for us, which is what happens if you end up at a trial, the judge is the one making decisions. So people want to gain their power back, and they don't really know how to do it. And it's just, they end up just butting heads.
I think that's my whole entire series and show is about that, taking your power back, and I think that's why this conversation is so important, because so many people feel, like you said, powerless in the divorce process, or just looking for, really, again, the future. What does the future hold for me? What do I want it to hold? So it's so interesting. Let's talk about that. Which I think is a beautiful thing, because again, from my friends and the women who I've spoken to about, and while they go through the divorce, they don't know a lot, and they just kind of maybe sometimes think they're powerless in the process. They'll let their significant other get whatever they want because they want to just end it,
Right.
And that is not what to do, right?
That is actually one of the top mistakes that people make.
Okay.
So I think that if I had to list things that were mistakes and people should really think about when they're going through the divorce process, is not defining your goals and objectives up front is a big mistake. Letting your emotions drive your decisions is a big mistake. Rushing into settlements just to get it over with is a huge mistake. Instead, people should slow down the process to fully consider all the consequences of their decisions. And the court, they tend to order things like mediation sooner than they should, and people don't have the actual documents they need to mediate. So it takes your power away, and people feel like they're negotiating against themselves.
Oh, well, so let's talk about how do you structure your sessions for someone's listening. Someone calls you and whatever they say, because they could be at either stage. They could be thinking of divorce, they could be in the throes of it, or they could be well after the divorce and still trying to get their life back on track, which is very hard and can take a long time for people to do. So how do you structure your sessions?
So remember, divorce is very, very unique to each person. So there's no two divorces that are exactly alike. So I need to take a client where they're at. What's the most pressing thing for him? So I don't have like a one-size-fits-all game plan that I take everybody through. So during our coaching sessions, it's really figuring out what's the immediate need, and then talking about that, figuring out and exploring all different options. They need to feel that they're heard. So I do a lot of active listening and reflecting back. So I make sure I understand what's going on. I'll pick up, the obstacles that are getting in the way. And then we start tweezing out what they need to do to move forward. So that's what we'll do in our session. And at the end of the session, we always have next steps. Meaning what? What does that mean? Like your very next step, like what you go home and do tonight, or, much on a wider scope? It could be what you need to do tonight. It could be what you need to do, for the next week. It could be documents I think are important for you to get. It could be a strategy that we've come up with that they need to work on. So it could be a whole host of different things. So it can be immediate, but it can also be, a little further down the line, as long as it keeps the process moving. Right. And that's the whole purpose, because when you're in the divorce process, sometimes we really feel stuck and nothing happens for months at a time. And people feel like they're spinning their wheels. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I like to keep people on track and have tasks to accomplish so that they can move forward. Do I need this for my attorney? Is this the document I need to produce? Is this the discovery information I need to gather? How do I do that? How do I gather documents? It could be in early stages. How do I gather documents before I've even told my spouse I want a divorce so they don't get suspicious? So we can have strategies in place based on what they need and where they are in their process. And everybody's process is different. It could be, I think I'm being tracked, with surveillance equipment. I think someone's, hacking into my stuff. It could be simple things as I don't, have my own money and I don't even have a bank account or a credit card. We'll come up with strategies, that allow us to move forward. So we set ourselves up so that we're in a good place. Right. And then it's also about the house, right? Like, you don't even think about that. Like, who gets the house? How much, are we selling the house? Are you selling it back to your spouse, or, all that stuff? What are some of the paperwork? Would you okay, so we're going to get down to it now. So if someone's listening, right, and says, I'm thinking about it, what is the paperwork that you need for that initial or process? So people need to know, what do our tax returns say? What is the income for the last 3 years, 5 years? What does the Social Security statement say? What does, do we have our W-2s? Do we have our 1099s? Do we know who our health insurance is through? Do we know if there's life insurance? Is there disability insurance? Do we know bank accounts? Do we know credit cards? Do we know, do we have access to our online accounts? Do we have joint accounts? Are there credit cards in the spouse's name that you don't know about? There's a whole host of documents, but it really comes down to what are the assets, what are the debts.
Right. Well, I knew someone who was going through, I'm sorry, I cut you off. I knew someone who was going through,
go ahead.
I knew someone who was going through a divorce and their spouse, stopped them from using the debit card. I mean, I can't imagine I don't know if that's legal, but that's what happened. And then, she said, what do I do?
Right. And it happens all the time.
That's frightening.
And, when you file for divorce, you have to do an affidavit of insurance, and a lot of women, mostly women though, I have to say, when they come to me, they're like, I don't have this information. I know I have insurance, but I don't know who it's through, and I don't know anything.
Right. Sure.
And they're like, maybe their husbands hid it from them. Maybe they've just never asked. Maybe by the time they've said they want a divorce, now no one's going to supply it. Right. So it's, again, depending on where they are in their process, and when they come to me, I can help them in different ways.
Do you I know you said you want them to build a team. Do you also involve in that team how to, or have someone they can speak to on how to tell the kids and how to, what to say, the phrase, almost like the phrasing, but that's for lack of a better word, just something like to ease them through the process, because that's not only you're going through the divorce, but your kids are dealing with that at such another horrible level that you have to manage too, or help them manage.
So that's a great question, and that's actually part of divorce coaching, and that's where my mental health background comes into play, because we'll do role playing. We'll get to the point where maybe they act like the spouse and I'm them, and I may say, this is, I want a divorce, and then they will typically tell me how their spouse reacts, and then we'll role play on what we might be able to say.
Wow. That
might de-escalate a little bit. It's all about trying to figure out better communication skills and how to tell your children, I'll work with them on those topics.
Yeah, that's tough. That's very tough for everybody involved. That's and for the kids too. You talk about clarifying and the future, and mindset again is a big part, I think, of your job that you've told me about. So how it must be very difficult in your job to get the person to be moved past that emotional element. It has to be, right?
It's incredibly challenging for somebody to think that, okay, let's say I've been a stay-at-home mother and I haven't worked in 25, 30 years. How am I going back to work? How am I going to do this? How am I going to live alone? How am I going to, fix something if it's broken? I mean, this is what, the biggest fear of women is, how am I really going to survive on my own? And so I'm going to tell you, everybody survives divorce. They really do. And it's a blip in time when you think of your lifespan. And if they don't feel that it's going to happen, I'm the one who holds the hope for them until they start believing it. And that's my job, is to get them to believe that there is life after divorce and help them with that transition.
Wow. How often has it come that people come to you who are thinking of it and you've kind of helped them see that that's not really what they want? Has that happened?
It has happened. I actually think of this one client that I had. She kept saying to me, I want to see my husband in an orange jumpsuit.
Okay.
She was like, he had an affair. It's been going on. I saw the text, and she kept saying, that's what I want.
Like in jail. You want to see that person in jail.
She wanted him jailed. And so, we did a lot of, self-exploration, and she got to the point where she said, she was in her 60s, and she said, I don't want another relationship. I don't ever want.
I've heard that from people. Yeah.
And she said, I love my lifestyle. I've figured out a way to make this work and still have my lifestyle without going through a divorce, a really messy divorce, having it be very costly. And she actually made the decision for her that she could live with her situation.
Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah.
She felt that she got more out of being married than being divorced. And that's okay. And I'm not
judging.
Judge for whatever reason people want to stay in their marriages or get divorced. My job is to support the client.
Right. Wow.
And help them make the best decision for themselves. And for her, she wasn't willing to give up her lifestyle.
Right. Well, what about, has someone come to you and like you said, like that one story of like the woman focusing on that she wanted to, as part of the divorce, make him stop, chewing tobacco. But because, relationships are hard, no matter how long you've been in one, they're great. And there's that other flip side where relationships can be tough. So do you, when someone says, oh, like let's say they're saying, my spouse chews smoking tobacco and that's it. We're getting a divorce. I can't handle it anymore. Or something along those lines. And you're like, wait a second, like, let's talk about it.
Well, and in her particular situation, this was after they decided they were getting divorced. They were just mediating terms.
Right. You can't force someone to do something like that. You can't force someone to not do something like that. That's silly.
And I think that that's part of getting back to the goals and the objectives of your divorce. What's realistic? And I think part of divorce coaching is reality testing.
What do you mean?
People.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, it has to do with what can I really accomplish? What is really going to happen? How does the court system really work? A lot of women go in thinking that it's going to be one way, and they learn very quickly, or some not so quickly, that it doesn't happen that way, and they won't let go of that idea. I had one woman say, you brought up the house. The house is a huge bone of contention. She kept saying to me, I'm going to live in the house. I'm going to live in the house. I want the house. I want the house. And she said, I'm buying him out.
Yep.
And so we were talking about it, and she told her attorney, I'm buying him out. And so the attorney, she was spending a lot of money with the attorney, and the attorney's trying to, negotiate with the other attorney. She wants to buy him out, but she never really thought about, can I afford to? Can I get a mortgage? Where's the money coming from? Mm-hmm. And then after we talked about it, at length, she realized she can't get a mortgage. She doesn't have the money to buy him out, and now she has to come up with another plan. But she did. She wanted it so badly, and I understand that. Mm-hmm. And she told her attorney that, and then he was advocating for her. But it was something she really couldn't even do because she didn't understand the process of what does it mean, for me to get another mortgage? What does that look like if I have no income?
Right. It's interesting. Yeah. Cause it's interesting because I do real estate also on the side, obviously. And that's interesting because a lot of women just assume that they're going to buy someone out, but if they're not working, they don't have a job and they can't get the mortgage.
Right.
So it's a hard thing. And they're like, I didn't know that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, that's what I mean about kind of the reality testing. And if you start to explore different options, you can start tweezing out what makes sense and what doesn't, or maybe what makes sense to them is not really what's going to happen in the court system. And custody is one of those big issues because people fight mainly over two things, finances and the kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, a lot of people will say, and I'm getting full custody, and they're never, they'll only see them like once a month, but they don't realize, I'm from New Jersey, so New Jersey is, no fault, and they like 50-50 custody, and, women come and they say, but no way, I'm not doing that, not realizing that ultimately, that's the most likely outcome. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot that has to be talked through and explored. And how do we deal with co-parenting? How do we deal with when our kids go visit the ex? How does that, when they're not with us at holidays? That's also a big part of the divorce coaching. How do I help you with that when they walk out the door? When the ex is now involved with somebody else? When there's a new stepmother involved? How do we navigate that? How do we navigate those feelings? They're overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And that's hard to digest for everyone because I feel like maybe possibly, not all cases, but, I think your first instinct is almost sometimes make that other person a villain, right? Like,
right.
You want to make them the bad person and you don't want them to move on and be happy. And so you stay stuck in that place too. We only have about a minute and 15 before you say something good. So go ahead. You're to sum up, Lisa, your advice, in about a minute, your advice or 30 seconds, for people out there, best course of action during the divorce process.
I think the best course of action is getting the support that you need to navigate the process. Yeah. Find somebody like a divorce coach that you can work with so you don't feel that you're alone. Somebody that can help educate you, guide you, and really help you formulate, the right questions to ask your attorney, the right way to communicate with your spouse, the way that's going to decrease the contention and help lift you up through the process and really go through it with somebody like step by step, like hand in hand. So that you're not alone.
So great. Big thank you to Lisa Powers for coming on the show. Her website, powersdivorcecoaching.com. You've been listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. I'm Jill Conway. Thank you for listening to the show celebrating and empowering women. I hope you're inspired to pursue your goals, believe in yourself, be courageous, and dream bigger. I'm here to remind you that your voice matters and that your story has power. I hope you join me next time.